Do you like using cardstock strips? Today I'm showing 2 quick and easy ways to add them to projects. Hello there, Michelle Short here with Terrific Tags with Michelle. Today I'm sharing 2 quick and easy ways to add cardstock strips to projects. So let's get started. I'm using Gradient Cardstock for my cardstock strips today. So I'm using a Pinkalicious from the Cherry Blossom Gradient Cardstock Set, Mountain Mist and Volcano Lake from the Seashore Set, Warm Sunshine and Caramel Toffee from the Summer Afternoon Set, and Purple Wine from the Rose Petal Set. So I've cut all of them down into strips of varying different widths. I'm then taking a piece of Classic Crest 80 solar white cardstock, and I'm going to add a piece of double-sided adhesive sheet onto the front. This is because I want to completely cover the entire panel with the cardstock strips, and it means that I don't have to add adhesive onto the individual strips of cardstock. I can just place them on top of the double-sided adhesive, which is really helpful. So I'm going to remove the backing sheet off of that double-sided adhesive sheet. And then I can start laying my cardstock strips on top. I'm going to lay them in a diagonal. This is so that if any of my cardstock strips aren't cut completely straight, you're not really going to notice. If you were to place them on straight, if one of them was just slightly out, you really would notice it. And this way, no one is really going to notice in the slightest. So it's a really good way of adding cardstock strips in some sort of diagonal way. So I'm just going through all of the different colours here and I'm laying them down onto the panel, just making sure to try and butt them up to each other as best as possible so that there's no gaps in between. I do think it would look quite pretty with gaps in between, but because I've got that adhesive sheet, I do want to make sure that I cover all of it. So I'm just going to go through and kind of do it in some sort of colour order. To be honest, I don't think it really matters which colour order I used, but I'm that kind of person who does like to tend to go in colour order. I'm trying to have most of the cardstock towards, like the excess towards the right hand side. That's so that I've got enough to kind of cut down that I can use on, like I started sort of in the middle as you could see and then worked my way down, and then I'm adding some from the top again, and some of those pieces that I cut down I can use there on the top, so that's quite helpful. I am going to cut this down so that it kind of fits the panel. You can reuse those pieces if they're long enough. Some of them weren't quite long enough, but there's definitely different ways that you can reuse those pieces of cardstock for different projects, which is really quite helpful. So I've covered that panel here, as you can see, with the different colours of cardstock. I saw this colour combination. Someone used it on Instagram and I kind of fell in love with it, but I also think it would look really pretty just having the different shades of one of the Gradient Cardstock sets. So like maybe the Seashore, for example, having 4 different shades of aqua and kind of lining them up in some sort of pattern, I think would look really pretty as well. So I'm just making sure that that's really well stuck down and cut off the excess, as you could see. I'm then taking the Terrific tag die. This is one of the smaller tags in the set. I'm sticking that down with some low tack tape and running that through my die cutting machine. So now I've got a really lovely vibrant tag completely covered with cardstock strips. So for my second method, I'm just going to add some cardstock strips onto a white tag. So I've cut the tag from the same Terrific tag die set, and I've used Classic Crest 110 solar white cardstock for this one, and I'm adding adhesive onto the back of each of these cardstock strips and then placing them down onto the tag. I am adding them in a diagonal again. Like I said, it makes it so that you can't see any imperfections, and this time I did cut all of the strips to the same width. I don't think it really matters, it's just personal preference. I think it looks nice either way. So I'm just placing them down onto the tag. Again, just trying to butt them up as best as possible. And I really like the look of having the white sort of either end of the cardstock strips being in the middle, but again I think it would look nice with any kind of colour of the tag, but I do happen to quite like having bright colours with white kind of die cuts and things like that as well. So I'm just cutting off the excess from either side. And then I've got my two tags there. I think they look really pretty just as is, but I am going to add some white die cuts on top. So I've got two more pieces of classic Crest 110 solar white cardstock, and I'm adding some more adhesive sheet onto the back of each of these pieces. That is so that when I run them through my die cutting machine with the dies, the adhesive is already on the back, and again I don't have to really worry about adding adhesive or anything like that. I really love these double-sided adhesive sheets. I'm just cutting off the excess so that it doesn't get stuck in my die cutting machine. I'm then taking two dies from the Flowing Foliage die set. This is such a pretty set. I really love these foliage pieces. I've got one that's kind of more like flowers here on the right hand side and the leaves there on the left hand side. So I've run those through my die cutting machine, and I'm just trying to remove the die so that the die cuts stay inside the negative portion. That just makes it a little bit easier to be able to stack them on top of each other. So I've cut another two of each of the design from white cardstock with the adhesive on the back as well, so that I can layer them on top of each other. I do this quite a lot. This is just so that it makes it a little bit more substantial and kind of pops out from the background. So I'm just popping those pieces out from the negative. I'm trying to keep all of the little pieces inside, but because that adhesive sheet is on the back, they do tend to stick to your fingers, but that's absolutely fine. And then I'm just going to use the micro tip tweezers here just to kind of maneuver those die cuts so that I can try and get them straight on top of each other. And that's going to be 3 die cuts high. So I tend to try and find like one point that I can stick down first, and then I can maneuver the other bits of the die cut on top so that they're straight. What I love about this adhesive sheet is that you can kind of press it down and you can still kind of lift it up and move it until it's really well stuck down, so that's quite helpful. I'm then going to remove all of those inside pieces and use those tweezers there just to help me pop out all of those pieces. I'm then taking some vellum translucent paper and I'm going to add the die cut on top. I wanted the vellum to show through the open areas where that leaf is and also the back of the flowers, but I didn't necessarily need it to cover the entire piece. And when I do the second die cut with the leaves, I'm going to do it in a slightly different way, and it was so much easier. So I have cut quite a lot of this out of the video because this isn't really necessarily the way that I would do it again, but I'm just taking some scissors and I'm going to cut around this image. The kind of stem and pieces like that were a little bit fiddly, and also this piece there at the top. In the end, I decided to go from the back of the piece and actually cut that off so that the little holes didn't actually have the vellum behind it, and I think that still looked really pretty and kind of a little bit different anyway. But like I said, when I go to do the second one, I do it in a slightly different way. But for now, I'm just cutting around these elements, and I think that the vellum just looks really nice inside of those pieces, and it kind of dulls the cardstock behind just slightly, but you can still see through it obviously because it's translucent. So for the second die cut, I'm just stacking those up one on top of each other again with that 3 high of cardstock. I'm then going to take my bone folder and just really press those down together so that they stick nicely, and then I can remove that from the negative and then pop out all of those inside pieces of the leaves. This time I decided to cut 3 small pieces of vellum and just add the vellum behind the leaf areas, which is the area that I want the vellum to be. I should have really done this with the other image, I could have just cut some small pieces of vellum and added it behind the leaves and then also the flowers. But you know, you live and learn. It's the great thing about card making, you learn as you go. So this is now a lot easier so that I don't have to worry about the stem or anything like that. I can just cut around those leaves. And then also that adhesive is exposed as well, where I haven't added it on the stem, and so I don't have to add any adhesive to that when I go to add it onto my tag as well. So it's kind of a win-win situation in this way. So now I have my 2 die cut pieces with that vellum behind the open areas, and I do think it looks really pretty. So I can add them onto my tags. So for this one here, where the vellum is covering the entire piece, I'm just adding some small dabs of glue, just where the areas are of the cardstock, so you're not going to be able to see the adhesive through that vellum. I'm then just going to dab off the excess glue, and then I can place that down onto my tag. So just using those micro tip tweezers just to help me out place that down. And I think the white die cuts just look really pretty against that colourful cardstock strips. And then for this one here, I don't have to add any adhesive to that stem because it's got that double-sided adhesive on it. So I'm just adding a few small dabs of glue just behind the leaf areas. And then I can place that down onto the tag as well. And then because that stem is hanging off the bottom, I can just turn over the tag and then cut that off. I've then stamped my sentiments using the Tiny Sentiments Hello stamp set, and I've stamped them onto some black cardstock with embossing ink, and I'm adding a pure white crisp embossing powder on top, and then I can heat set them until they're completely melted and then cut them into strips. I'm then going to add some instant dimension foam tape onto the back of the pieces, but I don't need to add it everywhere across the back of these sentiment strips because I am overhanging where the die cuts are. So I'm just adding it in small areas, and then I can use some glue tape just to add onto the other side of that. And then I can just place that down. And for this side, I can just add some very tiny little pieces of that instant dimension foam tape, just where the areas are going to be that it's not going to overlap the die cuts. And then I can place that down as well. Ordinarily, I do tend to place sentiments down kind of more one side than others, but for these ones, I thought it looked quite nice adding them in the center of the tag. I'm now taking some glue tape and adding that onto 2 more tags that I've cut from Classic Crest at £110 Solar White cardstock. This is so that the tags have more stability, and then also it just makes it so they look nice from the back as well. I'm then going to take some twine and stick that through the hole in the top of the tag, and then tie that in a bow at the front. So it does take me some time sometimes to fiddle with the bows, and then I just cut those tails and kind of manipulate them down so that they're more in kind of the way that I want them to be. I did think about adding embellishments onto these tags, but I really liked how the cardstock strips and those die cuts are kind of like center stage. So let me know in the comments which one you like best, and especially if you like using cardstock strips, whether you like using them to cover an entire background or you like using them as an accent. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on the Altenew blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hello crafters, Jen here. For more tips, techniques, tutorials, and to discover which paper crafting products are right for you, subscribe to Altenew's YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Thanks for watching.